Hey everybody, I'm recovering from a few long shifts here, but still alive, so here we go. Um, Free communications, why don't more people take advantage of that, especially out here in the sticks, where cell phones really aren't the greatest at times? Um, sure, everybody has access to GMRS, FRS, CB, um, but in MERS, but you're limiting yourself, and I've mentioned that before. Your limitations are because of power, because of how many frequencies are available for your use, what you can actually do on those frequencies. You can't run data, you can't run digital, you can't run high power, you can't have repeaters on certain um, services like CB, on MERS. On GMRS, you can have repeaters, and that is a big up-to-do about linking repeaters. You read the law says you can't, but people are. We're not going illegal. We're talking by the book here. Yeah, okay, you don't need licenses for all those radio services, but other than GMRS. But again, you're limiting yourself. And you get up into FRS, GMRS, you're limiting yourself because you're up in UHF, and also because you only have a certain amount of channels available to you. So, yeah, the ham world, we have a lot more versatility. Somewhere way back in the playlist, there was a video where I talked about some of this stuff also. And CB, is channelized. You have 40 channels, period, done. And of course, you have sideband too. MERS, same thing. You've got 5 frequencies, 5 channels, boom, you're done. Then GMRS, FRS, I think it's like 22 channels, 22 frequencies, you're done. And you can only do what you can do with those. The ham world, we are not channelized. We have a band. So we have, for example, the 2-meter band, 144 to 148 megahertz. And then we have the 220 band, we have the 440 band, it's the 6-meter band. And it's not, you turn a channel and you get channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, 10, 11, 12, whatever, and you're done. You have all this space and everything in between. So we work on frequencies, not on channels. Plus, we can run multiple types of communications. We can talk if you want. You can run Morse code. You can run data, digital. You can send pictures if you want. There's all kinds of different things you can do. This video is going to basically concentrate on the simple pick up the microphone and blab. That's what a lot of us do. And that's the easiest, most convenient thing, especially if you're driving down the road. So what do I mean by free communications and people not taking advantage? Okay, you can argue with me that ham radio isn't free. Well, that depends on how you look at it. You need to obtain equipment. Yes, maybe you'll get some stuff for free. There you go. Okay, you need to take a test, get a ham radio license. It's like 15 bucks, 16 bucks, something like that. Big deal. It's not free, but it's pretty cheap. But once you have that license, as long as you maintain it, you're good to go. Now, as far as using it, you don't have monthly, you don't have semi-annual, you don't have annual, there's no subscriptions. You have that one licensure fee to get your original license and you're done. End of story. So it's not like a phone, it's not like internet where you have to keep paying and paying and paying to be able to use it. Where am I going with this? Repeaters. Okay. In the upper bands, there is some down in 10 meters, but like 6 meters, yes, there's some in 6 meters, but 2 meters, 440, basically, is where you're going to find your ham radio repeaters. Those are free for you to use. You don't have to pay somebody to be able to use it. I am a repeater owner, and I use my personal money, my personal time, and my personal aggravation to find a place to put the thing and set it all up. and it's an open repeater. Anybody with a ham radio license can use my repeater and communicate. They don't have to pay me. That's pretty convenient, isn't it? Just like other repeaters in the area or anywhere in the country, anywhere I go. I can use those repeaters and I don't have to say, hey, is it okay if I use your repeater to talk to somebody, or is it going to cost me 10 bucks or whatever? No. Repeaters are open to use. Once in a while, you might find one that's called a closed repeater, like a club owns, and they close it for club use only. And it happens, it's a rarity, but probably better than 95% of your repeaters everywhere are open for everybody to use. And who flips the bill? Not you. So it's going to be somebody like me, personally, and solely me. It could be another person and solely them. It could be 2 or 3 people who get together and do this project. It could be a radio club. It could be anybody. And they do it for the betterment of the ham radio community. And will they take donations and such? Yeah, maybe, just to help keep the upkeep of it. But it's voluntary. Nobody, no repeater owner out there is going to say, you have to pay me to be able to use my ham radio repeater. That ain't going to fly. So that being said, I've got a couple videos up, January and February, of KC5HWB's repeater challenge. A lot of key ups, a lot of call outs, not a lot of repeater activity here when I've thrown call outs. Does that mean the repeaters are absolutely dead? No. There's nets, there's people on repeaters when I'm busy or when I'm not around. But that's happens, that's fine. So that being said, here's the gist of how to throw a simple base station / mobile station on the air. What does it really take? I'm gearing this towards the non-ham who is maybe thinking about getting a technician level license, who maybe has no clue about radio. So I'm trying to keep this fairly simple. What do you really need to get a radio up and running on VHF or UHF? 3 things. Well, 4, we'll say. You gotta have a license, okay, ham radio license. You gotta have an antenna. You need to have a power source. And of course, you gotta have radio. So let's get into that. So I've already got the license. I've had that for a long time. So here's an antenna. Okay, big long one. Don't get misdirected by big long one either. Big and long doesn't always mean better. Now this one here, you're gonna notice a couple tags on it. 2M says 2 meters, and then 20 bucks. Last summer I went to a ham fest, saw this sitting on a guy's table, 20 bucks. 20 bucks? He goes, yep. Yeah, 20 bucks, I took the antenna. Now I own it. This antenna's been around since the 90s, probably about 1995, 96. I remember when they were manufacturing these. You could buy these at Radio Shack. And these are good antennas. I know these are good antennas. That's why I grabbed it. And it's a 2-meter band antenna. That's all you're going to get out of it. But hey, if that's all you're trying to achieve, A1. So that's why I grabbed it. Antennas are your make or break. You need a good antenna. Don't find a piece of junk. Don't come up with a piece of junk. Antennas are important. Now, you don't have to go buy some $500 antenna. Don't go doing that. You can make your own. But it needs to work correctly. We'll get into that. So the next thing you need to have is a radio, right? Well, I don't know if you can find these anymore other than maybe on the internet used. But here is an old HTX 212. You can see she's had some repair work done. And where did this come from? Radio scrap. These were good radios, and so were the 242s, which were just another version of this. This radio dates back to about 1996, somewhere in that vintage. Yeah, when I was a teenager, I could go to Radio Shack and buy ham radio stuff. You can't anymore, and now we don't have Radio Shack anymore either. But anyway, so this is a strictly 2-meter radio, and it's analog. There's nothing fancy. It's not P25. It's not DMR, no digital, no nothing. This is analog only. And of course you need a power supply. So for this video, I'm just going to use this Napa Deep Cycle Marine RV battery, 12 volt battery. And this is a old wired harness I already had made up. So I've got that rigged up on here. And we're going to plug everything together and make things happen. You could also use a power supply that you plug into your wall and converts your household power down to 12 volts. That's fine too, but keep in mind, the power goes out, your radio goes down. So that's what you need at bare minimum to get an analog radio up and running. One more thing that you really should have is called an SWR bridge or SWR meter. And the reason you should have that is because without one, you don't know what your antenna is doing. You need to know your antenna is working correctly, because if it's not, you're not going to be receiving well, you're not going to be transmitting well, and you could damage your radio when you're transmitting. So this is my SWR bridge. This is old, this goes back to the 90s, but hey, it still works. And this covers HF, VHF, and UHF. And I'm going to show you what this does. This little Gazuba is a antenna analyzer. You don't need to have one of these. They're really nice. But this does the work of a SWR meter, so I can look at the antenna, see what the antenna is doing without actually having to put power to the antenna. All right, looks like we're all ready to go, right? We have an antenna. We know it's the right band. We got it hooked up to the radio. We can turn the radio on. We should be all set. But are we? This is up and operational. We got the juice, we got the antenna. It should work, we think, right? Again, I'm talking to somebody who's never played with radios. What are we missing? We're missing the other half of the antenna. What's this clown talking about? The antenna's right here, right? Well, yes and no. Antennas need two parts. So right here we only have one part. When you stick this on a vehicle, because it's magnetic, what happens is the metal of the vehicle creates a ground point. So that the antenna sees a mirror image of itself. So you have a vertical going up and you have a vertical basically going down. It's invisible. It's not really there. But the flat metal of the vehicle around it creates that and makes the antenna work. Well, sitting here on a wooden workbench, like so, we don't have that. So, SWR meter, now we're going to hit on that. You have no idea what your standing wave ratio is right now, because you can't measure it if you don't have a way of measuring. SWR, standing wave ratio, in itself is nothing. It's just a ratio. It's just a number, a comparison of your forward power versus your reflected power. So when you push power out of your radio to your antenna, you're going to get something bounce back to your radio. If it's too much, that's when you can start damaging your radio. Your rule of thumb is to keep your SWR at 1.5 to 1 or less. 1.5 is definitely acceptable. But right now we have no way of measuring this because we don't have an SWR bridge / meter in line. So if this SWR is too high, too much power is going to bounce right back down the transmission line back to the radio. On top of that, it's not going to receive well and it's not going to transmit well. So let's take a look. I haven't touched the antenna, still right where it was. So I told you were probably going to see this little Gazuba again. And I am going to do this with the SWR meter in line. So a few minutes ago I mentioned the 2 meter band is 144 to 148 megahertz, 4 megahertz wide. So about in the middle is 146, right? So without having a ground plane under that antenna, I can measure the SWR using this without actually having to transmit with the radio. So what do we think it might be? We're at 146 megahertz, and it says 3.1 on the SWR. Whew. That's a lot higher than 1.5, isn't it? If I put that SWR in the coax line right now and I key up, I'm going to see the same thing. It's going to go doing. That's not good, okay? Too much power is going to be coming right back down into that radio. It's not going to receive good. It's not going to transmit good because the antenna is not working good right now. But we have no way of knowing that without a measurement tool. Like I said, you don't need to have the analyzer. It's a real cool, handy toy, and I use it a lot. But the SWR bridge, you could find them pretty cheap these days. So let's move the antenna and see what happens. Just for giggles, here's the top antenna right here. I just set it on the ground, which is really wet right now. And the SWR at 146 megahertz is showing 1.8, 1.9, just sitting on the dirt. Well, we don't want the antenna on the ground. So, knock the crap off it, throw it up here on the roof. Something like that, get it stop wiggling. All right. Right now we have, you can see the antenna right there. SWR, haven't touched the thing on the analyzer. It's 1.3. 1.3 is awesome. Checking across the band, all the way up in the top, we've got 1.2. All the way down at the bottom, we've got 1.4. We'll take it. I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm going to guess about the same as the workbench. Here's a stack of wooden pallets. All right, let's turn on the meter. See what we got. Get up in the middle of the band here roughly. And we have an SWR of 3.4, 3.5. That is horrible. Starting to warm up over here, it's nice. So that was just a demonstration on what can affect your SWR. Other things can too, but very simply in layman's terms. You stick your antenna out on a pallet, out on a piece of wood, on a workbench, something like that, it ain't gonna work. You need to get some metal under it. A cookie sheet, not like a little one. Get a good sized cookie sheet, baking sheet. That might be enough to do the trick if you're trying to do this inside or something. You need to get some metal underneath your antenna. Hopefully I was able to kind of make that semi-clear to you. So now we're back in here, obviously, and I have the SWR bridge in line. I'm going to show you what that does. The antenna I have stuck over here behind me on my hydraulic press over in the back. So I haven't measured it yet. We're going to see what it looks like. All right, this has a couple cables on it. One comes from the radio, and the other one comes from the antenna. So here's the antenna, here's the radio. The ports will be labeled on your meter as to what's what. These other ones over here are for HF. And on this one, I have my selector switch for HF, VHF, and UHF. So I'm in VHF at the 300 watts range. So I'm going to be hitting this thing with about 50 watts of power, so I'm way over my 30 watts range. Let's see what we get. I am on exactly 146 megahertz, throwing about 50 watts as far as I know. Let's see what happens. No, not on low power. Hang on. So on low power we had about 10 watts. High power, let's see what we get. About 40 watts. The SWR is around 1.8. On this meter I can see my forward power and reflected power at the same time. So you saw the one come up the forward side to hit 40 watts, and then you saw the other one come up on the reflected side to hit something around maybe about 4 watts, 3 watts. I didn't look that close. And wherever those two needles cross, on your SWR lines, that's your SWR. So here's where the antenna is. So yeah, you see her right there, she's stuck over here. So everything I did with the analyzer so far, outside, inside, here, there, and everywhere, you could do all that with the SWR meter. But the only problem is you have to keep putting power through it. You have to move the SWR meter with radio and all that. Whereas the analyzer, I can just take the analyzer and the antenna and there we go. So let's see what we could do with this. The SWR right there is a little higher than I like, but it's higher off the floor than the lift, and I don't feel like picking the lift up right now.
Figure out what parts are cold. I got a Huntron tracker that, you can check for dead shorts and opens. You don't have to plug it in.
Yeah, I haven't even taken it apart yet. I wasn't even expecting it to, work at all, but I decided to heck with it. I'll try it on VHF and see what happens, but definitely the HF, I can hear some signals, but they're not right. It's like on, I think it was on 40 meters on 7255, and they sounded more like they're coming on upper sideband. I couldn't tune them in on lower sideband. And some of the other bands I wasn't hearing anything at all.
Yeah, it sounds like diodes and stuff. Caps and diodes. I'd start from the outside and start going in, see what's dead. But something in there that protected it is, of course, that's all surface mount in there. It's going to be a nightmare. You need to borrow a rig. You can borrow my 847D. I'm not using it. That was totally different setup. But this, I don't know anything about signal link. There must be a 12 volt and a 5 volt on there, and a ground and a data, and maybe for different radios they're wired differently. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that radio. It's not good when the magic smoke rolls.
Yeah, I guess you got to be into this all the time to be sure what cable fits what.
That worked out pretty good. Those were a couple of the local guys, and we were just on simplex, so no repeaters, just radio to radio. And Phil somehow let magic smoke out of one of his radios. He was the guy who sounded really, really distorted there. So something went amiss with his radio. But anyway, Phil is 2 miles away, and the other guy, line of sight's probably about 5 miles away, something like that. So there I am talking to them, 10 watts of power with that mag mounting antenna sitting right there on a battery. Doesn't take too much. CB, people put up big base antennas and they're happy sometimes if they can get that distance. So something to think about there. In the shop still on the same radio as before, and I just got a 5/8 wave stuck out here on a piece of metal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's quite scratchy, but readable.
Okay, well, I expected it to not be perfect considering what it is. One of them old Radio Shack 5/8 stuck here on a hydraulic press, just maybe 4 feet off the floor.
Yeah, surprised you're getting it at all with that, but yeah, you're making it. It's, like I said, it's quite scratchy, but it's doable.
Well, we know my antennas and my gear are better than yours anyway, so that explains it.
Yeah, well, my gear includes escape routes for smoke. I had a bunch of smoke come out. So does your gear do that?
No, and I hope it doesn't.
Well, I challenge you to reproduce my efforts from yesterday.
That's my CB antenna. That's a pretty big antenna. That great big CB antenna, I can't talk as far as I can with what I just showed you. It ain't happening. It's because CB is down on 27 megahertz with 4 watts of power. Even on sideband, trying to talk those distances, and there's no repeaters to use. It's just not going to happen unless you get really lucky. But yet, this is normal for us. So on simplex there, radio to radio, This antenna inside's not very high, pushing 10 watts of power. My range is not going to be real far. Maybe, I'm going to guess 5-6 miles, something like that. If I kick it up to 40 watts, I'll get probably another 2 to 3 miles out of it. Elevation is everything with your antennas. So do the best you can, get it as high as you can. It's going to help you. So somebody who's 25, 30 miles away from here is not going to hear me on simplex. The only way we're going to be able to talk is if I use a repeater and we're on the same repeater, and then I have the range of that repeater. And that's the same whether it's using a base, a mobile, a portable, whatever you're doing. You're going to be limited to the range of that particular radio unless you are able to access a repeater, which then gives you the overall coverage of that repeater. And if that repeater is linked to other repeaters, then you have the coverage of those repeaters also. So that's all stuff you can learn down the road. So there's a good demo for you right there. I haven't changed a thing. Antenna's still sitting right here. That repeater is about 25 miles away from here. Throwing 40 watts at it, everything I can out of this radio. And the guy I was just talking to, he's right here in town. So my signal's going from here 25 miles out to the repeater and then coming back to him about 1.5 miles or so away. Do we need that repeater to talk? No, we were talking just a little while ago on 595, going direct. But I asked, hey, anybody around for radio check? And he happened to be listening, so he answered me. And he said, yeah, a little scratchy, but I can hear you fine. Not bad, huh? Everything has its place. And I've said that in previous videos. So I'm not going to trash on the other radio services. But think about it. With a CB, with FRS, MERS, or GMRS, can you do what I just did right there? Could you be at your house or sitting somewhere, hit a repeater 25 miles away, and then use the range of that repeater to communicate with somebody? As I said, I don't need a repeater to talk to Phil, who's only 1.5 miles, 2 miles away from me. We did it earlier direct, but he happened to be listening, so we talked. Now, that repeater being 25 miles away, if, let's say, somebody another 30 or 40, 50 miles beyond that repeater happened to be listening and came back to me, now we're 75, 80 miles apart. We can communicate because we have that repeater in between us, and we're using the range of that repeater in that high elevation. You can't do that on simplex with this type of configuration. You can't do that on a CB without a lot of power and doing illegal things. You can't do that on MERS with a handheld. You don't have the power. You don't have the external antenna. You can't do that on FRS or GMRS without a repeater or more because you don't have the power. Plus, you're up in UHF, so you're another 300 megahertz higher. Proof's in the pudding. This repeater is about 25 miles the other direction. Doesn't seem to be anybody home on there. That's okay. That repeater has great coverage too. It doesn't cover the area that the 910 covers. They're 45, 50 miles apart, line of sight. So, you got to learn your repeaters, where they're at, what they cover, what they'll do. You'll notice when I transmit, the frequency changes. Like this went from 775 down to 175, and then it went from 910 to 310. That's because of an offset. You have two frequencies when you use a repeater, and you can learn that later too. This baby, if I recall correctly, is about 40 miles away. This 146.640 repeater, that is in a freaking awesome spot, and it seems to damn near cover about half a friggin' state, literally, off one repeater. It's not linked to anything. It's a standalone. And my cousin and I use it quite frequently. It's way underutilized for its coverage, I tell you. I'm quite surprised I can hit it with this antenna sitting right here, but I did. But usually there's about 2 to 3 of us who ever really use it on a regular basis, and that's pretty well too bad. Be nice if we use more, but literally have talked with people. Bruce, way over in Monson, Maine, which is over Dover, Foxcroft area. That repeater covers way over there. It covers into Canada. It covers to the coast. It covers down Newport. I mean, up as far as Island Falls. Huge, huge coverage area. And it does a pretty good job of it. And there's no way I can cover all that with Simplex, not even with my 70-foot tower outside. And I'm sure not going to do it with that little antenna sitting right there. But you know what? If somebody pops up on that repeater, as long as they're within the range of that repeater, and I can get through that repeater, we're going to talk. I'm not going to tell you what to buy for gear or scrounge up for gear. I'm just going to give you a little bit of advice. And that advice is, don't fall into the trap of getting stuff that you can't program. For example, here is a old Motorola M1225 radio, 40-watt radio. You can jam 24 channels in it. Channels, remember that. It's channelized. You can only do so much with this radio. Does it work? Yes, it does, absolutely. But here's the problem. Let's say you find this online, something like that, 50, 75 bucks, whatever. You buy it. Now you have to get it programmed. You need a computer with, I think it's Windows 3.1, maybe Windows 95. Plus you need the correct Motorola software and interface to be able to connect to this to program it. Good luck finding that this day and age. This is 2025. Windows 95 was 30 years ago. Okay, you might be able to find somebody or a Motorola shop that still has an ancient computer that still works, who can still do this. But what happens when you can't? Then you're stuck with what you got, right? So let's say you program this thing all up for simplex frequencies, repeater frequencies, for what's current for you right now. And then a new repeater or 2 or 3 new repeaters come up in your area, or a PL tone changes, something like that. You're stuck with what you got. You can't change it. Or what if you want to travel to some other area? You can't change what's in that radio. And I'm not just picking on M1225s. That goes with anything, any brands. If you cannot program the thing, I would steer away from it. Stuff does become obsolete, even though it still works. Like this. I mean, this radio is about 30 years old now. Works, yes. But to get reprogrammed, if you can find somebody that has the capabilities to do it, they're going to want money for it probably. And it's a real hassle. Whereas that old 30-year-old HTX 212 on the bench in there, I can program that. I can change my frequencies. I can change my PL tones, do whatever I want right there on the radio. I don't need a computer. I don't need anything special to do that. A lot of ham gear now is becoming software based, like Anytone, for example. The 878s, 868s, 578s. You use a computer program to program those. And that's okay, because it's freeware, number one. You can get it all friggin' day long. You don't have to pay anything for it. You can update your own firmware. You can control that. Unlike this Motorola stuff. Good luck getting old Motorola stuff. And let's say you could get your hands on a copy of the software that's old enough to program a GM300 or a Meritrack or an M1225, for example. Let's say you could get that. Then you need a computer slow enough to be able to run it. And you're going to have the interface to be able to do it. That's a lot of hassle, guys. It really is. And again, I'm not trashing on Motorola. I'm not going to trash on old Kenwood's old commercial gear. But that's the problem you run into with commercial gear that requires specific things to be able to program it. Get something you can do yourself. Even if you need some help doing it, find another ham or whatever, to give you a hand because you can't figure it out. That's fine. But you need to be able to control it. That's what I'm trying to get through to you. So this setup I got on the bench in here, with this mag mount, battery and radio, I can take that anywhere I want and set it up. So yeah, is it a pain in the butt lugging around a deep cycle battery? Yep, but you know what? It can be done. Or you can use those battery pack things you can get now, Opus and all them other brand names that have 12-volt ports. You can plug your radio into that. There's a lot of ways to power a radio. And you can use it anywhere your license covers you, which is anywhere the FCC has jurisdiction. So US territories, you can go overseas with it. You just have to have permissions for like Europe and out of country. I've never done it, I've never dealt with it. I can't tell you the expertise on that, but you can pretty much use your radio anywhere in the world if you do it right. As far as US-based, US territories, right now, if my carcass lands in Puerto Rico or I land in Hawaii, it ain't gonna happen. Or if I can go to Canada, we get agreements with Canada, I ain't going there either. But just saying, you can take your ham radio with you and use it. If you're out in the woods, you're out fishing, you're doing whatever, wherever, you can take gear with you. You can take a portable, but expect the portable is not going to be as efficient as having something with some power with a good antenna. I think it was last year, I just happened to hear a guy on the repeater, that 9-1 repeater, threw his call sign out, and I answered him, and he was out off Bass Harbor in Maine, and he was in a canoe on a portable. So I talked to him for 2 or 3 minutes. He was out canoeing around MDI, Mount Desert Island. That was a pretty cool contact. You can take this stuff anywhere. Think about it, guys. Let's say you're an avid outdoorsman and you're out in the woods a lot where cell phones don't work, and you want to be able to have contact with family members back home. And odds are, most likely, there is going to be at least one ham repeater that's going to cover wherever you are. Maybe there isn't. That's up to you to figure that out. For everywhere I go, there's repeater coverage by usually at least 2 to 3 repeaters. And where the phones don't work or very sketchy, guess what? The ham covers it. When you're out and about with ham radio on VHF, UHF, this was just VHF here. UHF is no different really when it comes to antennas. They're a little smaller usually, but that's it. There's 1.5 million ways Sunday to rig up antennas. You can do like I got here. Mag mount, get stuck on some metal, run up a tree with a wire hanging under it for a counterpoise, a J-pole. There's a lot of ways you can come up with a way to rig up an antenna. It doesn't have to be my way or the highway. Do what works. And that's what matters. Ham radio is a hobby. It's not a, you have to do it my way or you suck. And anybody that tells you that, they need to be put in their place. Same thing with the gear. It's not you have to buy this radio or you're a bad ham or nothing like that. You get what works for you. And as I said, I'm not going to tell you what you have to buy. I just made my advice, my recommendation of get something you can program, you can control, and told you why. And if you decide, oh, I ain't going to listen to this idiot, I'm going to go buy this awesome Motorola because it's cool and it says it's a ham radio, and then you have to go pay a Motorola shop every time you want to change something, knock yourself out. That's on you. I could have used this 578 that I have in the house, taken that out for the demo because this is VHF, UHF, so it's dual band. And if we actually had some UHF to use around here, I guess I could have tried UHF simplex with Phil. I know that would have worked. But anyway, I would not have been able to use this antenna that I'm using for this demo because that's 2 meters only. It's not going to work up in UHF. So all I would have to do is use like this antenna, which is a antenna that will work on 2 meters and up on UHF on the 440 band. That's it. It all sets up the same. It's just a matter of what your radio capability does. It's not like you have to do anything super special to go from VHF to UHF. Just make sure you have an antenna that's going to cover both of those bands. A real ham radio is going to have a VFO, a variable frequency oscillator in it. This one has 2. So I'm going to go into my VFO. I'm in VFOA, and I can punch in any frequencies I want in here in the 2 meter band. So let's, I don't know, let's punch in 145.555. Okay. Change my frequency. I can transmit on that, run simplex. Right now it has a tone squelch turned on. Well, I'm not going to hear anything because of that tone squelch. Right there. 145.555. So if some friends and me are out in the bush or whatever, and we want to talk on 145.555 simplex, I can just punch it right in my VFO just like that, and I've got it. Well, what if we don't want to be on that? Let's say we want to go to 147.525. I can go 147.525. I'm doing this right on my microphone with these buttons. Now we're at 147.525. We can talk on that. Well, what if we don't want to be on there? What if we need to go to 146.565? We can go 146.565. See how quick I can change frequencies just like that? And then when I'm in my VFO, that's where I can go in and just push this button, shift. I got shift plus, shift negative, which is your offset for repeaters, which this is not a repeater, but that's where I would put in that. So when I key up, it will change frequency for the repeater offset. I would set up my PL tones for repeaters. I do all my programming right in the VFO, and then I just save it to a memory channel. There's no point of showing you how to program this thing because the odds of you getting one of these pretty slim to none, and every radio is going to program a little different. But that's just an example. That's how quick and easy it is for me on this radio to change frequencies, change PL tones, do whatever I want. I just go into VFO, boom, 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 change stuff around, save it to a memory channel. End of story. You don't need a computer. You don't have to take it to a shop. You don't have to pay anybody. You don't have to go, oh crap, my radio is 25 years old and these computers are dead now and I can't program my radio anymore. What do? I can still program. As always, happy to help you out. If you got questions or whatever, throw them in the comments and I'll do what I can to point you in the right direction, I hope. So I've been playing ham radio since '97. I've had a lot of fun with it, and it does come in handy, especially when other stuff doesn't work. So, and again, I'm not going to trash on the other radio services, but don't expect that you're going to go buy a GMRS, FRS, or whatever and do what we can do. See ya.